Let's get started. Today we are going to model, rig, and animate a simple character in Autodesk Maya. Starting off, is everybody familiar with kind of modeling with the base cube? This is kind of where we begin in every sort of aspect. And what I'm going to do primarily today is use this extrude feature for generating our content. And basically going to be hitting hotkey G to create even more extrusions. That'll be the hotkey of the day. I'm going to just push this around, hotkey G once again. And we are on our way to creating a little character right here. The other tool we're going to talk about today, if I'm in object mode, I'm going to hold Shift, right mouse button click, and we're going to insert our edge loop right here to start to create a little bit more content, maybe get a little bit of a waist on the character. And I'm going to scale this in a little bit. Let's extrude another face. Again, Shift, right mouse button, click, extrude. Allows me to kind of pull this down and in. One of the first and kind of worst things the novice student forgets is that we need this kind of space down here if we're going to create the legs, and that's what we call inner thigh clearance. We really need that. And I'm just going to grab these two faces right here, and we're going to extrude some legs. So for those of you who just stepped in today, my name is Jason Hopkins. I am recording a little video tutorial for you at the request of your actual instructor that I'm subbing for. And you can come back to this and kind of look at this yourselves at a later date. I'm going to extrude once again. Here we've got our, I'm putting a little bit of a bend in the legs. Let's extend this out. And if you'll notice, I'm kind of just starting in a real blocky fashion. Hotkey G, again, reiterates that, that extrusion. Hotkey G again, and I pull out my legs. We're going to grab our arms right here. And we've got our character's little shape here. What I want to do routinely is take a look at my character from orthographic view and just at that point in time just sort of start to shape stuff. Like, is this really serving my objective from all angles? And you want to make use of that sort of thing. Now I want to make use of each polygonal shape. I don't want anything to be too sort of square or what we might call rectilinear. I give our character a little bit of shape. So it's always a good idea to kind of come in here and play around with stuff in an orthographic way. I'm just sort of taking both of these. Here's our now in this particular case, what I'm actually going to do is extrude the arms below this this area and pull the arms out here because we're actually creating the deltoid muscles in this particular way. And just going to pull our arms out. It's going to look a little bit funny at first, but don't worry. I click on my universal scale tool right here. Just going to shape this a little bit more, bringing both of these out, just using my scale tool. Also, you'll notice I'm just kind of adding scale to this content, what we call tweaking verts. Watching everything from our orthographic views, creating nice fall off here. It's easy to kind of lose sight of that, make the character look kind of flat. So we are on our way, and let's extrude off of this. It's a good idea to kind of just extend the arm. We're going to go in and add our detail a little bit later, because I like to take advantage of the symmetry on both sides with our hotkey G. Oh, something went kind of wild over there. Let's try our universal selector. Okay. So I'm kind of looking at this, and I'm saying to myself, oh, that looks kind of strange. There's some verts that could be tweaked. Let's bring this down a little bit, soften that up a bit. Maybe we decide the legs could be a little bit longer. And once we get to this point, this is where we can start adding. This is where we can start adding some extra details. Now, one of the cool things about Maya is that we can add these insert edge loops at any point along the way. So I can add detail selectively. And this allows me to kind of round out my form in a variety of different ways. It's good to have about 3 edge loops per deformable component, elbows, knees, things like that. And what we're going to be doing here is setting our arms back a little bit, like so, so that we give Maya a definitive direction for deformation when we go to bind our character's skin. Hotkey Y utilizes last active tool. And it's usually at this point in time when I want to go back in and start tweaking things just a little bit more, just again to provide some more shape. Double clicking on these edge loops will allow me to kind of smooth things a little bit more. Create a little bit more of a sort of a fall off. Okay, we'll bring out sort of the knees. Let's create a little bit of shape here to our feet. You'll notice it's super important to just keep working in orthographic mode. You know, this guy looks very kind of stiff, flat. I don't know what you want to say. those things out a little bit. Give him some quadricep deformation. Again, just kind of scaling this stuff. Here's where we can start defining some of our musculature. And I don't know, have you guys seen somebody just build a little character from scratch before?
Yeah.
Yes?
All the time.
Oh, great. So we're just going to add an edge loop right here. Scale this up. So I won't take too much longer if it's redundant. Well, you can kind of see we've got some interesting shape here to play around with. I'm going to give the character some toe deformation. This will help us when we're messing with our walk cycle. And we can come in here and make use of some of these details. Give our toes some shape. Let's add some edge loops here, and we're almost to the point where I'll be satisfied to kind of leave us for the day. Let's round off that head a little bit. Let's add in some details for our wrist. We won't go to the trouble of making full-on fingers, but I will give our character a kind of trigger thumb. It's often sort of popular. Sort of simple. Simple game content. Selecting those faces, extruding, bringing things down. And then taking this and extruding. From our top view, you can kind of see, oh, our hands look weird. Let's fix them. Put a little bit of deformation opportunity in our fingers. And one nice massive edge loop across the top where we're going to then just sort of rotate that out a little bit. Okay, folks, so is this a pretty familiar, this is a pretty familiar process to everybody thus far?
You
Never.
will. Wait, what are you?
Design. I want to get sometime.
I think everyone has to take a minimum of like one 3D comp class.
Well, this will give everybody just a little taste, and like I said, I'll be giving you this tutorial, a link to this tutorial, so it should be of value down the road.
What button do you press to turn it?
What button do I press to turn it into trapezoid?
Yeah.
I'm not.
When you started making the first head, you cut it in half and then folded it inside.
You really. So Y repeats our last tool, and G repeats the last action. What I'm going to do right now, folks, is a really cool little quick trick. Let's select our verts right here, and I am going to shift right mouse button click. We're going to go to this thing called average vertices, and it just, what it basically does is it softens up, spreads out all of those verts. And watch this with one more little touch of a button, that is clicking hotkey 3. Look at that, I've softened my character up to the point of now he is a much more, he's a less 90s CGI looking character. So I'm using a couple of important tools here, namely my hotkey 3, which is Smooth Mesh Preview. I'm going to just make a couple of little modifications in sort of areas of musculature, just to give my character some more definition.
Did we not get Blender on this computer?
Some of them don't have them. Or you gotta turn on the plugin.
Yeah, I'm not totally sure. I didn't know you guys carried Blender. That's interesting. Kind of cool. Some freeware. But I'm just kind of giving this guy a little bit of definition here. And again, just sort of look at the character from beneath, figuring out how to give a little bit of shape to the character is going to be key. Alright, so this character's got kind of long, lanky arms. If I wanted to shorten those just a little bit, I certainly could. Let's maybe take them in just a tiny bit. I tend to like to err on the side of longer arms, because what ends up happening when you rig stuff is they tend to be a little bit, they tend to shorten a bit. The other thing I'd like to show you is when dealing with some materials and kind of other shading, let's slap a toon shader on this guy. One of the things you'll learn later on in greater detail is that all of this stuff right here shows history on your character. And so what you can do is go to Edit, Delete All by Type History and clean off all of that nonsense. The other really cool thing is that I can right-click and assign a new material to my character. And I can assign a number of different shaders. What I'm going to do actually here is, well, let's actually go a different route. Let's go to our render setup. Let's insert a little interesting tab here. We go to this rendering option. And under the render tab, there's this option for tune. And we can assign something called a tune shader. And I'm going to choose this shaded brightness 3 tone. So watch what that just did. I've basically got now a tune kind of outline on my character. We can change this color to whatever we want. You know, this could be a maybe kind of like a green. We could come in here, maybe make this a little bit. Could be a little bit different. But that's kind of a fun thing to kind of play around with, and certainly something that you're going to be introduced to down the road. Before we go much further, let's save this scene as our basic model. And I'm just going to save it to my desktop, just so we've got that logged away. So this kind of thing can go on. You can really add all kinds of interesting bells and whistles to your character, and it is at this point when we can potentially go on to the rigging aspect of Maya. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put this character on what we call a display layer right over here. Does everybody see this button? Create a new layer and assign a selected object. What that does is it allows me to click on this this device here that says T for template, and then I can actually start adding in joints. I'm going to go into my orthographic view, and let's go to our rigging portion right here in Maya. And I can go to the skeleton area, and I'm going to go to create joints. How many of you have gotten into some rigging? Got one, just one, two? All right, well, I'm going to just, again, show you the intro process, and you can just take this tutorial and then comb through it in greater detail. I'm going to lay down a joint here, 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 and here. And I don't like the clumpiness of this joint. We riggers prefer our joints to look tighter. So if I go to my animation joint size, I can actually like reduce that look. I'm going to click on this component right here. Oops. Hit Enter to complete the action. Hotkey Y to reinstate our joint setup. Then I'm just going to click along the character's spine. Like so. In this particular case, I've created 1, 2, 3, 4 joints in the spine and 2 in the head. Later on, you'll be introduced to full sort of facial rigging setups. I'm going to take my arm bones and click them in these various ways. Enter. Hit Y again to sort of drop in the thumb. And you'll see that I need to kind of take this hierarchy up, like so. Bring this over to the side, like so. One of the important things to consider when rigging, folks, is to render your character, or to model your character in T-pose. Everybody see how I chose to do that? Arms out to the side. Modelers tend to prefer A pose. Riggers like T-pose. And it's always kind of interesting to see the kind of battles ensue between those two aspects of the pipeline. But so here we are with the basic joint setup for our character. I'm going to then select this, and hit hotkey P to parent this arm to this joint right here. Good news is we can actually swap sides by default, going to skeleton mirror joints. And if we open up this option box right here, I don't like this. Why is this popping up? Make select object live. Can I close this out somehow? Oh, I need to get to an option box that this won't let me get to. I don't want more, I want to close it. There we are. Ah, beautiful. So if you'll notice, this option box allows me to flip this across the YZ plane, and I'm going to do just that. Automatic creation of the other side of the bones. So the other thing you'll learn in a more advanced rigging class, and I actually teach an advanced rigging workshop that's usually like 4 weeks long. What you'll learn is that with every rig you do, it's a good idea to select the hierarchy, and I just select this, select hierarchy, and we do something called freezing out the transformations. And then I'm also going to select this and go to set preferred angle. What that'll do is that'll keep, if you mess up the skeleton, it'll keep things looking in order if you ever want to reassume the preferred angle that you started with. So, a couple of bells and whistles that I'll move through very quickly. We can go create this thing called an IK handle. And I won't spend too much time explaining the difference between IK and FK, or really what this selection option is, but use Rotate Plane Solver. And what I'm going to do is click on the hip to the ankle here. Hotkey Y, once again, hip to ankle. And we're going to basically be able to move our character's leg using just that connector. I'm also going to create this thing called a locator. It's a little crosshairs that I'm going to bring over into my area, and I just duplicated it. I've got these sort of two elements. I'm actually going to scale them down just so they're a little bit more manageable. I'm going to take these two IK handles, and what we're going to do is freeze out our transformations. What that does is it cleans up these nodes. It keeps everything at 0. Here's going to be kind of our glorious moment in just a few seconds. I'm going to connect these locators to this thing called this IK handle using something called, I know this is technical, a pole vector constraint. What the pole vector constraint is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to control the knee. Watch this. Actually, let's take this and twist the knee out. Look at that. So template has been on just so I can kind of see the geometry but not actually select the character. Finally, what we're going to do, and I can go up here to view, actually shading, see my joints called X-ray joints. I'm going to select my whole skeleton. I'm going to select the skin. Oops, it's on reference. And we are going to bind the skin to the skeleton. Here's our default settings. Reset those. And let's bind those. Let's bind that stuff. So watch this, guys. Look at this. Here's our sort of moment of glory. We've got a character that is full on ready to animate. Was that too hard? I mean, it might be kind of difficult to follow at this sort of breakneck speed, but what it kind of should show you is that Maya is a very efficient program once you learn the tools. And all I'm doing here is just kind of checking out my deformation just to make sure everything is looking good. And it is. So there's this thing called an outliner in Maya, right over here. And it's basically our organizational platform for sort of keeping everything organized. This is my character's geometry right here. This is the character's skeleton. I'm going to group that, hitting Control-G. I'm going to just name a few things. Then these locators and IK handles are also going to be kinds of controls that I'm going to just call. I'm going to just sort of group that as controls. And then we're going to take all of this and we're going to put it underneath something called a control curve. So I'm just going to come over here and grab this thing called a NURBS circle. I'm going to bring this down kind of to the base of my character. Now we get really specific and crazy with control curves in more detailed scenarios, but for now all I'm going to do is just freeze off the transformations, and I'm going to name this global move. And I'm going to just I'm just going to drop all this stuff underneath the global move. So when I go to grab this, you can kind of see I can move my whole character around, and I can also scale the character. So it's just something cool for the gamer to be able to kind of control the character. I'll select both of these, and I'm going to create something just called like a name node. We'll name this character Henry, and that's just going to kind of keep this all in one clean designation in our outliner. Because you don't want a messy outliner or you'll get sent back to the pipeline. Sent back through the pipeline. The animator will say, I can't make any sense of these controls. What are you doing here? All right, at this phase, we're going to just save this. We just completed our rig. And how I'm going to call this, I'm just going to call this rig. We'll save it to our desktop. And bear with me for another 15 minutes or so, folks, because now we're going to get ready to animate the character. Go into this animation mode here. And the first thing I want to do with this character is I want to create something called a quick select set. That is, I want to make my life easy as an animator and just grab the controls that I'm going to need to make my character move in an efficient way. And in this particular case, I'm just shift selecting these pieces so that I don't have to keep selecting them down the road. So I just grabbed everything. I went through the hassle of selecting each of these pieces, and I'm going to go up here to Create Sets, Quick Select Set. And I'm going to just name these Henry Controls, and I'm going to add them to the shelf right here. So what this does is if I click on this little shelf button, I can actually key the whole character in one click. Okay? We're actually going to start using our timeline here. Does anyone know how long a walk cycle ought to take?
Like 0.7, 0.8 seconds, depending on what you want.
It's basically like a second long, right? And if we quickly look at our options here, first of all, I'm going to turn, as we turn into animation mode, we want to look at real time. I'm really looking at about 24 frames per second. I also want to just take a quick look over here and check some of my animation settings. Right now these are auto. We're actually going to turn on weighted tangents. That ought to be fine. Let's check our time slider really quick. So yeah, so we've got our frame rate. We've got our other features sort of turned on, ready to go. I like to turn on auto key as well. That's also a cool thing to have. Just activate auto key, and I'll show what that does in a minute. But we're going to make this. We're going to make our animation about 25 frames. Okay. The reason for that is because it breaks down really, really smoothly, and I'm going to show you exactly how we're going to make this happen. Does anyone do any traditional animation here? Any frame by frame? The equivalent in 3D. The equivalent in 3D is when you're making a drawing in 2D, you're making a pose in 3D. And I am basically just going to make my first drawing, so to speak. And we're going to do this through a series of pose manipulations. Now, if you'll notice, the body does a lot of twisting as we walk. And so I'm making sure to get that. We've got a nice straight leg right here, kind of moving back like this. It's a good idea to just sort of throw down an image plane when you are creating a walk cycle so that you can actually see any sort of interpenetration of geometry, so your character is not having problems. I'm just going to assign a new material here. Let's add a blend, and I'm just going to put a color down here, just so we can avoid sort of interpenetration of geometry. You don't want your game character to sort of slip through the floor. Throw that on a layer, and then I'm actually just going to lock it down. My wife and I have been playing the new Zelda Breath of the Wild. We just got the barbarian armor. It was pretty exciting moment for us. My wife's a big Zelda fan. You guys, has anyone played that here? No?
One guy had a Switch, he's not here right now.
Oh, my team is here right now.
All right, so we've got some, what I'd call paint weighting issues on this character, but I'm not going to go through that today. It's just kind of it's a little too involved. But basically, I'm taking great lengths to kind of make this a nice looking pose. Really as best as I can anyway, given our constraints. Just want to kind of even this out, maybe even take our character's fingers in just a little bit. So again, just to give you guys a little taste, a little overview that you can look forward to later down the road. You see, we want to have our character look interesting from all angles. And if I look at him from here, the grand question is the character interesting from that staged standpoint? Does he look good from all angles here? And the answer is, I would say, decent. So once we've gotten that, I'm going to hit my quick select set right here, and I'm going to hit the hotkey S right here and at frame 25. Does anyone know why I want to have the beginning and the end frames the same?
Because it keeps looping back around.
That's exactly right. It's the key to your loops. Do you guys know Alex DeMartian? He and I also, good friends and colleagues. Whoa. We've actually been doing a bunch of work together on his game. What I'm going to do is just take this leg back here. We're now going to move into the center of the composition, and I'm going to do the opposite pose. So we're going to kind of do this. So I'm basically doing the opposite side of the walk cycle now.
Question for you.
Yeah.
Is there a way, let's say I'm working on a hand, is there a way to center pivot like all the fingers to like a rotating part of it? Like a bunch of objects to like make their center a different object center?
Yes, the way to do it is by grouping those objects and then setting your center pivot in a different spot.
Okay, makes sense.
Yeah, you can take objects and then group them. It's a great question. Yeah, just group those objects
And does that make them like one object when you actually select the?
No,
No.
you can still have independent functions, but still take benefit from animating the group. So, folks, here again, I'm going to just hit hotkey S and key this pose. One thing I did notice is I would probably benefit from a little bit more of a forward lean in this pose, and I may actually want to activate that right here as well. The way to copy is just select this, right-click, go to copy, and then paste it right over here.
No, I'm sorry. How would you actually? What do you actually press to group them?
Control G. So check this out, guys. I hit play, and I'm halfway there, right? Look at that. That almost looks like one of those, old top-down games like Gauntlet. Arcades in the 80s. But it's not particularly amazing. But I've done basically 3 poses, and it already looks like it's a walk cycle.
So does the program just automatically fill in between those 2 poses?
Yes, it'll blend between these three poses. Let's get more complex though. I'm going to go into the center here, and we're going to add in our what we call passing pose. Basically take this down flat. Just hit this, hotkey S. Yeah, so it's going to be this foot that picks up. Straight leg there. Our hips, when we pick up a foot, they tend to shift. The weight's going to shift over. Hip's going to kind of drop down. The body's going to counter that from this side. Arms are going to be pretty static. We're going to pick that foot up. Maybe I could build in a little bit of overlap here on the arms. Again, anything to just make this look a little more interesting. So let's add our passing pose on the other side of the walk cycle at frame 19. You'll notice that we just pick this leg up here. The other side's going to lift and kind of move back. This is going to flatten out. rotation there. Character's going to straighten a bit right here. I'm going to hit my quick select set, hit hotkey S, and let's figure out our overlap right here. So maybe this arm comes up a bit. Maybe this arm drags a little bit. Hips are going to shift to the side and drop down. Body's going to move to correct that. Again, every time I make a big change, just hit the quick select set and hit S, and we've got this. Kind of just look at him from all different angles. We have just a few more poses to put in here, or drawings, quote unquote, and they're actually the easiest ones, but things are looking good. We're going to add in our low pass. So once the body like steps down, you know, if I look right here, my character's actually going to sink down into the ground like this, and what that's going to do is give my character sort of that necessary feeling of weight that we long to feel, that we're not feeling currently. So look at this. So our character steps down, pushes into the earth. And then right here at frame 10, this is what we call our high pass. And this is where our character is going to be highest up. There we are. Down, passing, high pass. Maybe a little higher up. Let's do the other side as well. So again, here's our low pass right here. Oh my goodness, look at this. For some reason, my feet did not key. That's bizarre and unfortunate. That means that I have to go back and fix those. That's working, as is this. But it looks like these feet controls for some reason didn't key in my quick select set. So we may have to make some adjustments here when dealing with the foot. thought I did key them, but it's possible that I did not. Anyway, just making some quick adjustments here. Reclaiming my feet. Just pasting. Okay. One more pose. My high pass on my final side. Almost there, folks. And then you are free to do your work if you haven't been doing it already. Hotkey S. And there we are. We've got our main poses for our walk. Now, some of you might be wondering, why is there a pop to the characters? Anyone know?
To add weight? Or just the keyframes?
Well, we're just actually repeating frame 25. Remember, frame 25 is actually identical to 1. So if I trim off that one, if I just take off that one, we'll get greater fluidity right there. The one last thing that I will say when animating, and I think we can just save this file. I'm going to let you have these files if you'd like. We'll put them up on the computer. We'll call this walk cycle. This is what we call blocking in the animation world. This doesn't include the process of splining, that is refining our frames. Anyone familiar with this little beast right here? This little button, the graph editor. This is how you really get your work looking stellar. You know, I'd come in here immediately and I'd start to refine some of this. Namely, handling issues like this. You know, we want to spline these. We want to make sure our character, our character content kind of all along here is splined and smoothed. If I grab all of my keys, one of the cool ways that you can ensure, and this is for you gamers, if you want to ensure that you're getting nice completed cycles, if you go to pre-infinity cycle and post-infinity cycle and then view the infinity offset button, this will actually show if things are all kind of coming together appropriately. You can actually tell if your stuff's feeding into itself in a nice smooth way. You can even sort of fix things that seem sort of off if there are sort of asymmetries that you're trying to deal with in this particular case. I'm just kind of looking right here. You can set these to identical values, so you can start to just make things look symmetrical and perfect. Other things, let me just take a look at my rotate. Yeah, look at this. You see this little hitch right there? That's because these tangents are strangely not the same. They're not flattened. And so now what we have is some good rotational content here. Also, look at that little hitch. It's kind of nasty. right here, we'd maybe want to spline these out. So content. So our rotational content here is cycling. You can kind of look at this and just sort of see which ones are the stinkers. And you can kind of see that right there happening. I'm going to make sure this is all nice and smooth before you actually go on and print your, like bring your character into Unity or Unreal. What are you guys working on? Neither?
This class,
Not
it's
yet?
all up to everyone.
Okay.
We're just doing concepts right now.
Yeah, it's not like we're actually building a game.
All right.
Considering all of us, well, most of the class are like
First year.
first year for this.
Got it.
And the fact that he wasn't here at the time.
Gotcha. So I'm just going to do pre-infinity, post-infinity cycle so you can kind of see that. You guys see, you might be just looking at this and being like, what is he doing? This is just totally ludicrous. But having this video will give you a nice platform for later classes that will really, I think, help make your time here much more productive. And I'm just kind of looking over, making sure there aren't any major or grotesque foibles in our graph, because that's all going to cause issues down the road. Just check this one last little rotational piece. Yeah, right there. See, that's nice. We want those nice flattened tangents. It's got a nice smooth kind of feel to it. This, we'd probably be better off doing something like this. Just making some very quick graph edits. So we've got some nice fluid. All right, so that's what we call splining in the industry, folks, where we actually start to add some fluidity to that. Do you know? And you notice now how everything is nice and fluid. I mean, we're ready to make Link run across a woodland area. I'd go in at this point to each control and really kind of make it shine. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about good play blast etiquette. There's this option here called Show, and there's this thing called Play Blast Display. And you may not even know what a play blast is, but it's the way animators show their work. We're going to go to Override Viewport, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on None, and then I'm going to show just polygons. What that's going to do is it's going to hide all of this kind of nonsense here, including, say our grid, just these elements that are sort of not contributing to our well-being. I can even do the same thing here. Animators don't want to see all these controls. They just want to be able to evaluate the strength of the animation. And you can kind of see right here that that is much clearer, right, than anything else. I can also go in here to my camera settings and check out my resolution gate, what actually ends up being rendered out. So I want to kind of get a nice, frame here. I can come in, create a light. Create a directional light. You can actually show the light so you can actually see what it does. This is a light that will create some drama for our scene. And check this out. give it some color. And I can turn on this shadow option right here. Use ray trace shadows. We can make this this shadow bluish. And then I can actually turn on the feature right here that shows my lights, that shows my shadows, that shows this thing called ambient occlusion, and shows me motion blur even, and anti-aliasing. So just by clicking on this, I can set myself up for a pretty sweet looking play blast. Let's turn off our light. And by right clicking on the timeline, I go to play blast, choose AV Foundations, fine. We'll do H.264. I'm going to do a scale of 1, a save to file. We'll just call this walk cycle. Save it to a location. Put it on my desktop here. Click save, and then it runs through this, pulling up the play blast. I can hit loop and Control F for full screen, or maybe that's not what it is on this computer. Enter full screen. And there we have a character modeled, rigged, and animated from scratch, ready to loop, ready to bring into Unity. And we can create idle cycles, death cycles, walk cycles, run cycles, and really begin to creatively implement our design goals and objectives. That completes our lecture of the day. I'll type this in as intro to Maya. I'm going to save this onto the desktop.